My children, come closer to the fire. Do you see how my shadow stretches long and thin against the mud wall? It is a loyal thing, a shadow. But there was once a man in our village who tried to trade his away because he was terrified of what was attached to the end of it. I remember the year the yams refused to grow. The earth was hard, like the heart of a man who owes money. I was just a young girl then, my waist beads clicking as I walked to the Afon market. That was the day I first saw him, Obinna. He was a man built like an Iroko tree, strong and wide, but his eyes were darting around like a trapped bird. Obinna was the richest man in our village, with 4 wives and barns so full the wood groaned. But wealth cannot buy a quiet mind. You see, Obinna had a dream. In this dream, a figure draped in a cloth of dried banana leaves stood at his doorway. It didn't speak, it just pointed a skeletal finger at the space where Obinna's heart beat. It is only a dream, his first wife, Neka, had told him as she pounded fufu. But Obinna knew better. He started seeing the figure during the day. He would be standing in the town square under the hot midday sun, and he would see a man standing in the shade of the mango tree, a man who didn't cast a shadow. The village grew quiet when Obinna passed. He stopped wearing his fine Isiagu clothes. He began to wear rags, thinking he could hide from the spirit of death by looking like a beggar. He stopped bathing. He thought if he smelled of the earth, death would think he was already a corpse and move on to someone else. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the palm trees, painting the sky the color of a bruised orange, I saw Obinna running. He wasn't running from a lion or a creditor. He was running through the red dust roads, his feet hitting the ground with a desperate thud, thud, thud. He stopped by my father's compound, gasping for air. "It's coming," he whispered to the air. I can hear the dry leaves rattling, but there was no wind. The air was as still as a held breath. Obinna did not sleep for 7 days. He believed that if he closed his eyes, the visitor would finally step over his threshold. By the 8th day, he took a bag of cowries and traveled to the edge of the evil forest where the great medicine man, Agaba, lived in a hut covered in bird feathers and old bones. "I want to live," Obinna pleaded, throwing the cowries on the floor. "I have barns, I have wives. I am too important to be swallowed by the earth." Agaba looked at him with eyes that seemed to see through Obinna's skin. "Death does not care about your yams, Obinna. Death is a farmer too, and he only harvests what is ripe." "I want to be unripe," Obinna cried. So, Agaba gave him a pot of black liquid and a warning. "This will hide your scent from the world of the spirits. You will become like a ghost among the living. But remember, when you hide from death, you also hide from life. You cannot have one without the other." Obinna drank it. When he returned to our village, something was wrong. Very wrong. I remember standing by the community well when he walked past. The air around him felt cold, colder than a mountain stream in the Harmattan season. His skin had turned the color of ash. The most disturbing part, his own dogs, who used to wag their tails at his scent, began to howl in terror. His youngest son reached out to touch his hand and pulled back, screaming that his father felt like a piece of ice. Obinna didn't care. He laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "I've done it," he shouted in the market. "I am invisible to the Great Reaper." He began to live like a madman. He would walk into the thickest parts of the forest where the leopards lived, daring them to bite. They would sniff him and walk away, confused. He walked through fires and didn't feel the heat. He thought he was a god. But as the weeks passed, Obinna realized the medicine man's warning was true. He could no longer taste the spicy pepper soup his wives made. He could no longer feel the warmth of the sun on his back. When he spoke, his voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a deep, dry well. He was winning his race against death, but he was losing his soul in the process. The moon was a thin silver hook in the sky on the night it happened. The entire village was asleep, except for me. I was sitting outside because the heat was too much to bear. I saw Obinna walking toward the crossroad. He looked like a shadow moving through shadows. He reached the center of the 4 paths and stopped. "I am tired," he yelled at the sky. "If you are there, come and take me, or leave me in peace." Suddenly, the wind picked up.
It wasn't a normal wind. It smelled of ancient dust and dried flowers. From the path leading to the forest, a figure appeared. It wasn't a monster, it wasn't a skeleton. It was a young man dressed in simple white cloth holding a staff. He looked exactly like Obinna did when he was 20 years old. "You have been running a long time, brother," the figure said. Its voice was like music and thunder at the same time. Obinna trembled. "Who are you?" "I am the rest you denied yourself," the figure replied. "You gave up the taste of food, the warmth of your children, and the joy of the morning just to stay alive. But look at you. You died the moment you stopped being afraid." The figure held out a hand. Obinna looked back at the village, at the huts where his family slept, at the red earth he had spent his life tilling. He realized that by trying to outrun the end of the story, he had missed all the best chapters in the middle. "Is it too late?" Obinna asked, his voice breaking. The figure smiled, and it was the saddest thing I have ever seen. "It is never too late to stop running." Obinna took the hand, and in an instant, the ash-colored skin turned back to a healthy brown. The cold air around him vanished. He took one deep, long breath, the first real breath he had taken in months. And then, as I watched from behind the bushes, both of them simply faded, like mist when the sun hits it. The next morning, the village was in an uproar. Obinna was gone. His bed had not been slept in, but in the center of the crossroads, the elders found something strange. Lying in the dust was a single perfect yam and a pile of gold cowries that had turned into dried leaves. You see, my children, we all have a shadow. We all have a visitor who will one day knock on our door. Do not spend your life building a wall to keep him out, or you might find you've built a prison that keeps you in. Now, go to sleep and do not fear the dark. The dark is just the earth's way of resting before the light comes back.